I guess it's official because we now have an opening bump with a great riff, great pick by producer Jay Strovey. Really do appreciate that. Welcome everybody to the RealAg Radio After Show for Thursday, May 5th. Hope you're having yourself a great day. Hopefully, if you did tune into RealAg Radio today on Rural Radio 147 on SiriusXM, thank you so much. We had the Farmer Rapid Fire today. We talked to farmers from across the country, found out how they're making out in their fields and as they get ready for spring. One of the farmers, Shaun Haney, actually down in Excom, Alberta, in the southern part of the province, pretty much wrapping up. So big differences across the country for sure. Hey, we are live here on the After Show on YouTube and Twitter. So if you want to make a comment, put a question in based on what you're experiencing out there in your field from a condition standpoint, we'd love to hear from you. Put the comment in the box or the reply, and we'll see it here, and we'll get to as many of those as we possibly can. Love to hear from you out there in the audience. So yeah, we talked to 4 farmers across the country. We were in Ontario, Manitoba, Saskatchewan, and Alberta. We try to kind of make our way across the country every Thursday from east to west. And as expected, we really heard a number of different conditions out in Ontario, waiting for it to kind of warm up a little bit, waiting for the sun to shine, waiting for some of these rains that have been coming intermittently, if they would just lay off a little bit so people can kind of get planting. People are talking about how, hey, I feel I would like to have been started by now, but we're not exactly in a situation where it's late. And that seems to be sort of the pattern what we've heard the last couple weeks, people waiting for that soil to be fit so that they can hit that field, those fields running as, not as fast as they can, but in a situation where they'll feel good about it. We talked to Michael Groot from Ontario, and he talked about how, he's still a corn guy in the sense of always seeds as corn first instead of soybeans, but that is a pattern that we have seen a lot more here as of late. We also heard today from Adam Gurr. He is out he's in Rapid City, Manitoba, outside of Brandon, and pretty good moisture situation. So like many people in Manitoba, it's definitely a situation where they've had huge amounts of rain that have come through, some in worse shape than others when it comes to some of the flooding and overrunning conditions that they have seen. But things sounding a lot better in Manitoba than honestly they are in, say, southwestern Saskatchewan. We talked to Daryl Franzu, who is just outside of North Battleford in the northern part of the province in Saskatchewan. And like many people in northern Saskatchewan, off to a really good start. Things are looking good. There still is some snow, though, in the tree lines, once again showcasing the differences across parts of the prairies. Because you get past Daryl, and you move into southern Alberta, and Shaun Haney told us all about the fact that things are just exceptionally dry. He made, and Shaun's been farming for quite some time, and he kind of made the comment that, I just have not seen it like this before, which is, we all have recency bias, but the fact is it is just exceptionally dry in a situation that for a lot of growers really struggling. And he did admit that he had that canola's going in, really agronomically, no justification to put a canola in, but the fact is sticking with rotation, and there's crop insurance. And so that's a part of that. Gary is watching in Scotland. Awesome. Gary, I'd love to know where you are in Scotland. I've been there a number of times. My brother-in-law used to coach hockey in Glasgow for the Glasgow Clan. So I have been to Scotland numerous times, love going there. We've had some good times in Scotland. So I got some really good friends still in that Glasgow area. So hello from Scotland. Great to have you here, Gary. Really appreciate you watching on YouTube. When we were talking to Daryl Franzu from North Battleford, Glasgow, Saskatchewan, one of the things that Daryl had, I had asked Daryl if he was mechanically inclined. And for those of you that have been a fan of real agriculture for a long time, you know that I will joke and say that, hey, I'm maybe the most unmechanically inclined farm kid in the history. And I said on the radio show today that if there was a competition for that, like, Canada's Worst Driver, that kind of show, right? I'm not even sure that they would just hand me the trophy and say, hey, it's all yours. And, if this was maybe the 1950s, the 70s, the 80s, I don't know, decades ago, it was kind of a skill you had to have to farm. you had to be mechanically inclined, or at least knew your way around the shop, and you enjoyed pulling wrenches and you knew how that all worked. And one of the things that Daryl and I talked about is that still the case? Do you still need to be mechanically inclined in order to do a good job farming? Is that still something that exists? Is that still something that is critical, is important? And you could always do it without being mechanically inclined, but I wonder if it's actually lesser of a priority skill than it ever was. And I'm super jealous of those of you that are mechanically inclined, because I really wish that I was, to be honest with you. But there's a lot of options when it comes to the outsourcing of that now. There is obviously the local private mechanic that does a lot of that kind of stuff. Some farms out there even have mechanics. Daryl talked about the hired man that they have, very, very good at shop work. And so they really, really lean heavily on that person to do a lot of that heavy lifting when it comes to that wrench work. The other part of it is, think about electronics now, right? We battle all the time about this issue of right to repair, okay? That all has to do with, a lot of that has to do with electronics, and that's where the basis of a lot of that fight is. There's a lot of equipment now, just like your vehicle. You can pop the hood and you look in there. It's just like, where would I even start? Because so much of it is electrical, and that's a different skill than, say, mechanics is. So there's that part of it too, that I wonder if just what's involved in a piece of machinery now, the pulling wrench part, the mechanic part of that, has actually also decreased with the evolution of farm equipment. And then there's the other skills that you could have on the farm. And so there, just because, there's a lot of hats that people wear as a farmer. There's a lot of hats, right? You've got to be a business person. You got to have the strategic planning part. You got to have the agronomic part. Maybe it's the animal husbandry part. You've got to be the marketer, right? And then you got mechanics. There's all these different skill sets. Well, let's be honest. There's very few unicorns out there, even for those of you that are farming. How many of you actually feel that you do all of those things really, really well? Traditionally, though, it was that the mechanical part of it that just was a really, really good fit that went along with the being a farmer, so to speak. Nowadays, I wonder if you were to sort of graph all of the skills that are involved in being a farmer, I think we've upped our game in terms of the amount of farmers that have really, really good agronomic knowledge. Not just, hey, agronomic knowledge has been passed down from generation to generation, but people that went to school, took some classes in the area of agronomics, people that are trying to continually upgrade and participate in continuous learning when it comes to agronomics. Also think of the business end. Think about how much work has been done in the area of financial literacy on the farm. I think this is a thing that's in Canada and the U.S., and probably even for Gary, who's watching in Northeast Scotland. Okay, probably the same thing. The amount of farmers that have that skill now of financial literacy, and not just like, hey, I know what a debit and credit is, but actually really being able to dive deep into what their statements are saying. That level of financial literacy, although we have a long ways to go, that skill, that knowledge has really, really increased. And with that, we've probably, some of these other things have taken a little bit of a back seat. So I really wonder if we track some of this. Maybe this is something the RealAg study should look at in the future, which is the skill, so to speak, of mechanics, is it on the decline? And why? And Daryl had pointed out that, hey, my dad was okay at that kind of stuff, but it wasn't exactly something that was pressed upon me, pushed upon me. I would say I'm kind of in the same situation, although I would say my dad is exceptionally better at those kinds of things than I am. I'm a far cry from his level, but he wasn't exactly a heavy-duty mechanic. And neither actually was my grandfather on that side of the family. But I also had friends that grew up in neighboring farms that were outstanding at things like mechanics. But, if I sort of thought about it, maybe they weren't something like a good marketer, or, necessarily that, maybe the area of financial literacy or strategic planning or whatever all these skills are that we are trying to break down. So I wonder if that's something I've always put myself in sort of like an isolated pool and an island on that one, but I wonder if that's becoming more and more of a little bit of the norm. But I think for a lot of you at least can get your way around when it comes to mechanics. And a guy I know that's coming back to the family farm, he's getting his heavy duty mechanic ticket. So, but doesn't have much interest in the business side of the farm. And so he's got another sibling on the farm that will probably do more of those kinds of things. And I think that's the key when it comes to knowing what you're good at, is whether it's another member of the family that's good at it, or it's you're hiring for it. Like we talked about in Daryl's situation where, there's a hired man in that case that basically was able to, he had the skills to provide the mechanical role in the operation. You got to know what you're good at. And instead of, I remember a Mind Your Farm business that we did where we talked about continuous learning. Okay. And, the guest had talked, he was the head of learning for Corteva, I think was his title for Corteva Canada. And one of the things he talked about is, hey, why focus on your weaknesses, right? Why not build upon your strengths? You can always hire somebody to do the things you're not very good at. And let's be honest, if you're really, really crappy at them, are you really going to get better at something to, sort of raise the bar where you can honestly say, hey, I'm really good at that? Probably not in most cases. I don't care how many classes I went to on mechanics. One, I'm not very interested in it. And two, I know I'm not going to be good at it. I just can't. I've tried. It's not for me. Okay. So no matter how much I worked on that weakness, it's just not going to get better, at least to make any sort of gains. So why not focus on my strengths, which are other things where I could, take some classes, do some learning, really kind of pick up speed on some of that stuff. And then I'm really, really kind of being able to make a difference in the operation. I think that actually makes a lot more sense. Right? So for me, it's the business side of things. It's the marketing side of things. Always been very interested in things like crop marketing and strategic planning and business growth, things like that. Those are the things that I'm interested in. I got a comment here from Jim, who's watching on YouTube. He says, hey, if I could do it again, I'd do a commerce finance program / degree. So that's interesting because I know Jim from Lancer, Saskatchewan. And Jim is very good at mechanics. At least that's always been, he's got that engineering background. He is very good at mechanics. So, Jim, if I could do it all over again, I'd probably take a HR, more HR classes because owning a business and got some, we have team members, employees, and I wish that's something that I was a little bit more fluent in, or like build upon. That's building upon a strength. So that's interesting. I'd be curious, Jim, on why you feel that way. Is that because that's a weakness of yours, or something that you feel you're reasonably good at on the financial literacy side, and you could build upon that strength? That would be really, really super. So we should be able to take callers. So I would love to talk to Jim about that. Give me the why on that, Jim, if you could. I would love to hear from you on it, and anybody else that is out there in the audience. I would love to hear what your thoughts on it are. Do you think that the skill of mechanics on the farm for farmers is on the decline? That is interesting. And will we, as we had many farms that were hiring, maybe a heavy duty mechanic, will we see more farms that have people with electrical tickets based on all the electrification that we're seeing in the world? And, people talking about electric tractors and things like that. Think about an irrigation farm and all the electronics when it goes with a pivot. There are irrigated farms that have, people with their electric tickets on the farm because they're doing so much of that kind of thing. It's very, very fascinating, very, very interesting in my mind because because I get that question from colleges, right? What are the skills What are the skills that farmers are going to need tomorrow? What do you think? What are you hearing? And so these are things that, colleges and universities have to think about as they train the people of the future in some of these areas. In fact, probably more so colleges like the Lakeland colleges, the Olds colleges, Ridgetown, all of those kinds of schools. They've got to be on top of this to make sure as they're putting out ag diplomas that they are giving them the tools, the skills, the assets to be able to function and do a really good job in the workplace. So I'd ask Jim. Interesting. So I'd ask Jim why he felt if he could do it all over again, he would just do a commerce/finance program degree. And the why of that is, in a $1 per hour basis, I think the return for finance is greater than mechanics or agronomy. That is interesting. That is really, Kate. And so from a school perspective, digital electronics may be over electrical. Good point. Yeah, there is a bit of a difference there. I'm probably simplifying that a little bit too much. It's actually probably, going back to hiring, outsourcing for some of these skills where we feel we have a deficit position. It is definitely, most definitely cheaper to probably hire a mechanic or an agronomist than it is to hire somebody to do some of the financial stuff, right? So if we think about the financial aspects of like bookkeeping, controller activities, or more like CFO, like forecasting and planning, and as it comes to like, hey, if I buy that quarter, can I justify that price? Like doing that kind of financial analysis, you're probably onto something there, Jim, that is cheaper. Or it would be cheaper for you to be able to do that yourself than it would be to say to hire it, comparatively speaking, to hiring somebody to do some mechanic work on the shop, on the equipment, or somebody to go out and scout fields. I bet you the mechanic is more expensive than the agronomist, just sort of throwing that out there. So very, very interesting in terms of, especially when it comes to, I think the greatest challenge here is for farms that have 1 or 2 employees, maybe they don't have any employees, versus a farm that, a large scale operation that has 20, where it becomes easier to backfill some of the skill deficits when you have, 10, 20 employees, which some farms do. Some farms have more. Some of the local feed yards around here have, upwards of 50 employees. So, but if you're where the greatest challenge is, and where, we do have some unicorns, so to speak, is the solo operation, where you're having to do a lot of this, a lot of these jobs. And also you also have a harder time justifying the outsourcing of it. And some of the stuff you do very, very well. And some of the stuff, well, I get by. I just sort of get by, right? And I think that's the same whether you owned a farm, or, as I use a comparison, a family bakery, a farmer hardware store, any sort of family operation, or entrepreneurial situation, right? Somebody starts a business, an internet-based company, and they're burning the midnight oil, doing it themselves. There is a lot of challenges that they have to take on a lot of different roles, wear many, many different hats. And like we've been talking about, some people do that very, very well. And some of the things you just try to do what you can to try to not mess it up, so to speak. So tomorrow on RealAg Radio, we are going to have a RealAg Issues panel. We got Kelvin Hepner with me, of course, as always. Lindsay's taking the week off. She'll be out. But Andrew Campbell of Fresh Air Media will be joining us, and we're going to be talking about a number of different issues that are impacting agriculture this week. One of the things, it sort of has to do with some of the electrification we've been talking about. One of the topics I found this article where John Deere is trying to move to where 10% of their revenue is going to come from, it's become like a SaaS business, like where it's a recurring revenue. You're paying a monthly fee. And John Deere's trying to move into that direction. John Deere has been focused for the last couple of years, if you kind of pay attention to some of their marketing, what conferences they're going to, Agritechnica, the Consumer Electronics Show in Vegas, they are turning into a tech company. With that comes recurring revenue that they charge you as the farmer to access the tech. How do you feel about that? That's one of the things we're going to be talking about tomorrow on the panel. Is that good? Is that bad? Does that price come, to get, maybe I'm going to ask some dumb questions here, but does that mean the price of the equipment comes back, or is this charges on top of the high price machinery costs we're already paying? Probably the latter, but we'll find out what our panel thinks tomorrow. I think also we're going to have Justin Funk from AgriStudies on. RealAg Studies did a poll or a survey this week. We had over almost 1,000 respondents. I think it was 950 people answered our survey on the NHL playoffs, right? So we've done a couple. We've done one on fertilizer supply, one on inflation, and this one was on the NHL playoffs. So you can do serious topics lots. We can also have some fun. And this week we definitely did, and people picked who they thought was going to win the Stanley Cup playoffs, who they didn't want to win the Stanley Cup playoffs, and a whole bunch of other questions as well. So I think Justin's going to join us tomorrow on the show to kind of go through some of those answers, which will be a lot of fun to hear from Justin, of course. Appreciate your time today, your feedback, your commentary. Thanks for also tuning into RealAg Radio. If you don't have a SiriusXM subscription, and hold on here for a second. If you do have a SiriusXM subscription, you don't have to have the thing in the dash. You can also download the app and you can stream it over the app. So that's a pretty cool, easy tool to use. And if you don't have SiriusXM, you can always download the RealAg Radio podcast. So I encourage you to do that as well, so you don't miss any of the things we're talking about. I've been having a lot of fun all week doing this after show. It's a lot of fun. Sometimes we get through the radio show and it's sort of like, I got more to talk about. We're done. Okay, I guess we'll do it. Okay, so this is great to be able to spend some time with you after RealAg Radio is over. Thanks everybody for getting real and getting connected with real agriculture, and we'll see you again tomorrow. Cheers, everybody.